that I'm about to make. You know, we talked about it. We just alluded to the folks that we want to honor because we live in the greatest nation on God's green earth. And then we have a team that calls itself America's team. I'd like to remind everybody they haven't won a Super Bowl since 1995. They've had 3 playoff appearances since 2009. They've been walking pieces of mediocrity for the vast part of the last quarter century. And I actually think a movement should be started as to whether or not Dallas is worthy and deserving of being called America's team, because we all know that answer would be an emphatic no if you're talking about football. Now, if you're talking about public relations, if you're talking about headlines, if you're talking about hype, you're talking about the star and the helmet, you're talking about those cheerleaders, certainly you might be America's team. But when you're talking about actual productivity on the football field, hell no. It's not applicable to the Dallas Cowboys. Now back to my point about Dak Prescott. Let me be very, very clear. I think that Jerry Jones sounds good. It's real easy to sound good right now because Jerry Jones is a businessman. He's a brilliant businessman, and he's very, very astute and adroit at avoiding saying the wrong things at the wrong time. For him to go out there as Dak Prescott was balling the way that he was balling, considering how moribund the Dallas Cowboys have looked without Dak Prescott since he went down with his broken ankle, considering the fact that he's fresh off a season in which he threw for 4,902 yards, 30 touchdowns, just 11 interceptions, completing 65% of his passes, and you still could not come up with a long-term agreement for him. Jerry Jones is smart enough to know that at this particular moment in time, while this dude recuperates from that devastating injury that cost him his season, knowing that Dak Prescott is still his best option, better than a Garrett Gilbert, better than an Andy Dalton, better than a Ben DiNucci and all of this other stuff, you damn well had better say what Jerry Jones has said. But in the end, the proof is in the pudding. It's where you sign on the dotted line. When you sign on the dotted line, instead of fretting over whether it's 4 years, 5 years, or whatever the case may be, you get this man signed to a long-term deal. Jerry Jones knows that to say anything otherwise would really be frowned upon by the American public. And as a result, he's smart enough not to say that. But we all know, because we all know football, at least to some degree, certainly not to the degree that Ryan knows it, but we all know, Max, that if you've got Trevor Lawrence available to you or Justin Fields available to you and you're the Dallas Cowboys, if Jerry Jones couldn't sign Dak Prescott to a long-term deal but still signed Andy Dalton as a backup, why the hell wouldn't he draft one of those
point differential and has allowed the most points this season? 290 points allowed, their second most through 9 games in team history. And at minus 13, the Cowboys have the worst turnover margin in the league. No other team is worse than minus 7. It is the Cowboys' third worst turnover margin through 9 games all time. But Stephen Jones had this to say in looking ahead. He said, you're changing a culture. You change when you change the leadership. You throw on top of it that we had an unprecedented environment with the virus, and Mike, meaning head coach Mike McCarthy and his staff, weren't able to have interactions with the team other than virtual. So that brings up the question. There's challenges out there, but there's a lot of other new staffs that have had the same challenges. You throw that in there, then you throw the injuries that we've had to work with, and certainly it's been a big challenge. That was in response to questions about the job security of Mike McCarthy. He's not even been there one season. We're already talking about that. So I guess I would phrase the question to you this way, Ryan Clark. If you were making the decisions in Dallas, would you look at it and say, bad luck? Bad injuries, I'm bringing everybody back next year, and we're going to make a run. That I'm just running this season essentially back with Dak and McCarthy and everybody else, and next year is going to be entirely different. Is that how you would view it? Oh, what a week this is going to be.
No, I don't believe you look at it that way. I think you can't look at it in a vacuum. You don't know what pick you'll have next year. You don't understand how contract negotiations will be, and I don't think that this coaching staff in full should come back the same way. When you look at the defensive side of the ball and what Mike Nolan has done as a defensive coordinator, they do have the pieces they expected to have. And they have been terrible throughout the season. If that doesn't improve, I believe that's something you need to look into. And obviously you don't want to give up on a coach in his first year. But, you know, we've seen it done before. We saw it done with Steve Wilks in Arizona, and that has worked out for them. And so if you are the Dallas Cowboys, you need to look at this team from a standpoint of, if we run this thing back, how good and how competitive can we be? Or is there a way to keep the core of this team and then move some pieces around to be able to compete immediately? I think they have to look at this inside and out to figure out what's the best plan to move forward with for the Dallas Cowboys.
They have fascinating decisions to make at coach and at quarterback. Dominique, would you just run it back next year?
Nah, absolutely not. And I know that we think of Mike McCarthy as an offensive coach, but Kellen Moore is the guy who has the offense. The one thing that Mike McCarthy could really put his fingerprint on was hiring Nolan to run that defense, and that defense has been a problem. And you could say that maybe the Dak injury is a random thing that threw the season off, but that's not the problem. That defense was terrible before Dak got there, and I understand blaming the pandemic, but we all dealing with it. Like, all the teams are dealing with it. This is not a unique Dallas situation. Some teams with good coaches most likely, have figured out how to be good or at least be respectable in this situation under these circumstances. The Cowboys have not.
And what do you think, Dan Graziano? Is there any reason to believe, we hear what the Joneses are saying, is there significant reason to believe there could be a coaching change there?
No, I believe them when they used to say about Jason Garrett, no, he's not going to be fired during the season. That was true. He wasn't. So there is reason to believe them. I admire Stephen Jones for standing by his guy and his decision, but I mean, to say culture change, I mean, culture was not the problem under Jason Garrett. It was in-game decision-making and an inability for the coaching to elevate the team on game day. So I don't know exactly what they're getting at there. They hired Mike McCarthy, and they keep Kellen Moore, as Dominique said. I'm not sure what they were trying to change, but it doesn't look like it's been a change for the better.
Well, it'll be fascinating to see where it goes. So we have one more piece of business we would like to share today, and that is that we will remind you, in case you need reminding, that today is Veterans Day. And as always, we would like to extend our most heartfelt thanks to all of those who have served in the armed forces in this nation, protecting us and giving us the freedom to sit here and talk about sports and have all the fun we do every day. And we would like to name two in particular of whom we are particularly